When I first started debating, I was really bad. And so I'd sit down with my coach after rounds and we'd go over all the reasons why I'd lost, coming from our judges. The reasons could be I simply dropped any important arguments that the judge wanted to vote for, but I forgot to bring them back up. Or I didn't make any sense, and I didn't weigh the pros and cons of both worlds. Until one day, it just came down to the way I spoke. The judge called me and my voice whiny and irritating. And I didn't understand how I could take that as a learning opportunity, because that wasn't something I could change, the tone of my voice. No, it wasn't about my arguments and what I wanted to contribute, which was advocacy for ethnic minority groups like the Uyghurs in China, but rather the way I spoke. But if I wanted to take that as a learning opportunity, as I did because I was very young, I realized that I would speak with a lower tone of voice. I'd become more masculine and debate less like a woman. However, I'm not the only one that's experienced this trend. In fact, according to Dazed magazine, women in the workforce have started to deepen their voices in order to gain the same amount of respect as their male coworkers. In fact, candidates in political office, running for political office, according to American scientists, were 13% more likely to win when they had a lower tone of voice and garnered 4% more of the average vote share. And individuals like Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher even lowered her voice to the extent at which she developed injuries to her vocal cords, to the point where plastic surgery clinics are offering voice deepening surgeries for these women, to think that they have to deepen their voice in order to get respected. However, I'm here today because that isn't true and that isn't something we can change. Thus, the way we talk and the things that we have to say influence the world around us, which is why today I want to open our future frontier into rhetorical feminism. Rhetorical feminism is the belief that language isn't just a mirror reflecting our beliefs, it's a tool that changes it. Through rhetorical feminism, we're able to identify three different things: power, identity, and agency. And through these key factors, we're able to shape our beliefs and our society. Think of words like, she's so bossy, or irritating, or he's so powerful. These words don't exist in a vacuum. They make up our beliefs, and in that, change how we see society. However, if we want to abide by rhetorical feminism, we're acknowledging these beliefs and changing them and the words we use in order to better represent our future. Thus, rhetorical feminism has been a term lightly used between 2001 and 2020. Most recently in 2020 by Professor Dr. Cheryl Glenn, a professor at Penn State University and the director in their program of writing and rhetoric. Within this program, she's been able to write her own book, Rhetorical Feminism, and this thing called Hope, and anchors rhetorical feminism into 6 different key attributes, 3 of which include disidentifying with hegemonic rhetoric, collaborating, and seeking alternative methods to resistance to voice the concerns of marginalized people. And in doing so, she's been able to create the start of change that me and my friends have been able to expand upon. But what does rhetorical feminism look like outside the scope of just women's rights? Well, we're seeing within social justice, the way we think of things impacts the way we see them. For example, within my AP African American Studies class, we were learning about the race riots. Now, I'll take the time to ask you what you think race riots means just from hearing the 2 words, race riots. Now, if you told me that, my first instinct is that we're going to have horse chariot races, which these horses are carrying these carriages, going down a track, and whichever horse is the fastest wins. But then, maybe I tell you it's in the context of African American history. Then you kind of get this idea that race riots, okay, maybe this white race and this black race is just going at each other with no reason, and we don't really know why. But then, my teacher, one of my favorites, Miss Williams Adams, wants to call these race riots race uprisings. One change of word. But now with race uprisings, I'm kind of understanding that there's something wrong. There's a sense of social injustice. Maybe they're fighting against oppression. racism, segregation. And all he needed to do was change one word to understand that. Now we could take it a step further and acknowledge these race rights in 1919 during the Red Summer as the white race rights, acknowledging the fact that the white community at the time was the one keeping a system of white supremacy that oppressed Black people within history. And we're understanding who the aggressor is, not just the fact that these two races are going at each other for no apparent reason. That's what language and rhetoric does. It changes how we see things and thus changes how we see history. And you didn't even need to know the complete history to understand that. All you need to see was a change in word that allowed you to see what history actually reflected. Thus, in understanding this, me and my debate teammates Cindy Chen and Paige Tang founded Ignite Her, the first global and youth-led organization that focused on change for women's rights through rhetorical feminism. Through this, we've been able to challenge narratives such as, why do boys take a girl's virginity, but girls only lose theirs? As if these boys and men are active participants in society, but women are only objects to be acted upon. Take and lose. One simple word carries centuries of assumptions and sees and envisions how we see power dynamics between women and men. And that's only one word. Thus, by investigating ideals like these, we've been able to create change and ensure that we're able to influence not just ourselves, but future generations of girls. So, how do we practice rhetorical feminism? Well, it starts with questioning, and it starts with noticing. When you hear someone call a girl's voice irritating, just like the judge did to me, think about why you think that way, what it is specifically, or how that's just the way boys are. Why do you think about that? When you challenge rhetoric and you understand the rhetoric that you're spreading, you're able to see who are you empowering and who are you diminishing, thus ensuring that your language spreads positive social change within our world. We've been able to see this within Ignite Her's community, a 5-hour online conference where we've had Australian Olympians speak globally, as well as the UN USA president at our own conference, in which this activity I led was an online post-it board in which girls were able to add post-its of their own affirmations, these beliefs that they wanted to bring into the world about themselves. Things such as, I believe in the women I'm becoming. I bring value to every room I enter, and I deserve to be heard. These recognize the insecurities that girls once had, but now are able to take up space in this room that they didn't once felt like they weren't able to. Thus, through rhetorical feminism, all of which came from these girls, not just all myself, we're able to see the growth and change that women are able to participate in throughout society. So, if I had to talk to myself at 12 years old, when I received the feedback that my voice was whiny and irritating to listen to, I wouldn't tell her to deepen the tone of her voice. And I wouldn't tell her to become less like a woman in order to just win some debate rounds. Instead, I tell her to stay true to who she is, because rhetorical feminism anchors us in the hope that the language and the words we share influence the society we see and how we see other people. Thus, by inviting us and inviting you guys to join me in this movement, we're able to see that we should start now with our language, with our words, and our messages, because this is what's going to create the positive change for our future and break into another future frontier. Thank you.